Kayaking the Broad River in the great state of South Carolina is what we're going to be talking about today, specifically the nearly 17-mile stretch between the city of Peak and Harbison State Forest just outside of Columbia, South Carolina. Now, this stretch of the river is touted as one of the best smallmouth fisheries in the state, as well as a great place to see a lot of wildlife. So we're going to talk about all that today, talk about the put-ins, takeouts, all that good stuff. So stay tuned, hit that like and subscribe. To get directions and more details on where the put-in takeout spots are located, check out the website gopaddlesc.com. It is a great resource for information on waterways in South Carolina. From their website, under the heading Paddle Finder, click on Explore Waterways. From there, it will bring up a map, and you can search for different trips you might want to take or bodies of water. Or you can simply click on the icon for the waterway you are after. Now, I know where the Broad River icon is, so I'm just going to click on that. But clicking on that will bring up another box where you can click on Waterway Details. And this will bring up a little bit of information about the river, the things you're going to see on the river, and will also show you all the different segments of the trips that you can take, okay? So just click on the segment of the river you want to learn about, and it'll bring up those specific details, including the put-in, the takeout spots, as well as current water flow statuses. And if you look at this particular trip, the Peak to Harbison run that we're going to do, you can see this trip is 16.6 miles long, and it should take between 6 to 8 hours to run it. So it's rated as moderate, but that's only because of the length and how remote this whole trip is. So this is a great place to check out these different trips that you can run in South Carolina. The put-in point is located at the Austin Canoe Access in Peak, South Carolina. It's right next to the Austin Trailhead for the Peak to Prosperity Passage of the Palmetto Trail. That's a lot to say. Peak to Prosperity Passage of the Palmetto Trail. Anyway, you probably only have to transport your kayaks about 60 yards or so from where you unload them, so it's not real difficult to put in. But here's a tip though, if you have a trailer, okay? First of all, you're not allowed to park where you unload the kayaks at. So what they want you to do is they want you to take your vehicle up to the upper lot, which is just down the road just a little bit, not maybe another 80 yards or so, and it's uphill a little bit, and there's a lot. That's where they want you to park it. And so the thing is, in the morning when you get there, there's not a lot of people. Actually, nobody is there, and you go park and you come back. But by the end of the day, the parking lot is full. There's people walking around. There's a couple cars coming through on the gravel road there. And it gets really hard if you just kind of pulled in with a trailer, okay, up on that lot with a lot of people there. So if you're going there with a trailer and you drop off, even if nobody's there, turn around that parking lot, back your trailer in, it'll make things a lot easier on you coming out. Now, when we ran the river, the flow was between 3,000 to 4,000 cubic feet per second, and we had a decent current for the most part. Now, the river stays pretty wide for about the entire trip, and it's pretty scenic and it's pretty remote. So I don't think we saw more than maybe 5 or 6 houses on the almost entire 17-mile stretch of that river. So it is pretty remote. It's very much a wilderness area. The river itself is easy to navigate, but really just because it's so long and just the fact that you're in the middle of nowhere, I wouldn't do this trip alone. You want to have somebody with you in case something happens. Just common sense. Hey, what is that? Bald eagle. Bald eagle. See it? Huh? Now, wildlife was abundant on this trip. I mean, within the first 5 minutes of launching the kayaks, spotted our first eagle, just kind of soaring over. It was just really cool to see that. Not something I get to see every time, or often rather. You know, pretty much we saw eagles the entire length of this trip. You know, you see one or you see two together, and it was really cool. In fact, we saw one just basically take a dive from straight up in the clouds, come straight down and nailed something in the water there, or tried to anyway. And it was really cool to watch that. Saw several otters. And, you know, they didn't have any fear. They seemed to come pretty close to the kayaks. I mean, within, 10 feet of the kayaks. And we saw several of those. That was pretty neat. We saw some ospreys, some red-tailed hawks, abundance of turtles, and a few gar. Now, our plan was to fish for smallmouth on this trip. And although we caught one, it wasn't as productive as we thought it would be. But really what I learned for this trip, it's extremely hard to fish this section unless you maybe had a motor to move quickly between the productive waters. The trip is just really, really too long to fish this way and put in this at Peak, come out at Harbison, and get out during the daylight, which we've never done this run before. We want to make sure we found the exit, which is a little difficult to find. So just, I'll talk about that in a minute. But, you know, after 3 hours on this trip, we found ourselves only about 1/4 of the way through it. And at that point, we decided we need to do a lot more paddling than fishing if we're going to make it out before dark. So just keep that in mind. It does say on gopaddlesc.com that 6 to 8 hours to run the river. But that doesn't include fishing time. So once you start fishing, slowing everything down and you're not paddling, I mean, the river does have flow, but a lot of areas just not that fast unless there's a lot of shoals and stuff and it narrows down or something like that. But you just don't make a lot of distance when you're fishing.
Nice South Carolina smallmouth.
There we go. Good deal. All right. There he goes. Now, after running this trip once, I don't plan on trying to fish this section again. It just simply takes too much time going down from point A to point B. But if you want to do like an all day long paddle run where you're pretty much in the wilderness, you want to see some eagles, this is the place to be. There's a lot of scenic areas where you got a lot of rocks cropping out of the water, as well as a lot of islands along the way. Now, these islands are choked with vegetation, so it's not like you can just pull up and camp on the islands or anything like that. They're pretty full of trees and vegetation right up to the water. So there's not like a place to even pull off to stop for lunch on these islands kind of thing. All right, so the takeout is a whole nother story. So first of all, in order to get access to the canoe ramp at Harbison State Forest, you need to contact them ahead of time, and you got to provide them with a float plan. So they've got a form that you can download and fill out, but they do not do email. So you have to either bring it to the office or you have to fax it in. So it's 2021 and they don't do email. So I don't know. But anyway, once you do that ahead of time, they'll provide you with a combination of the locks, which will be on the gates to get you back to the canoe launch. So once you get to the park, you got to drive 6 or 8 minutes to get you all the way back there. There's a couple gates you have to go through. Now, at that point, you can leave a vehicle in that parking area at the ramp area down there. So that's good. Now, the ramp is not on the river. It's on a creek, okay? So you got to keep that in mind when you're coming down the Broad River, getting near the takeout. You got to have some way to know where you are at, especially if you've never run this section before. Now, I used my iPhone and Apple Maps to look for where the creek, where it joined to the Broad River when we were getting down there, and I could see my spot where I was located based on location services. And I could see the creek coming up where the takeout was. I had my truck marked on there, so I knew where that was. But if you look at this map here, it shows you there are 2 creeks in the area. So it's a second creek once you get down this way. Now, I'm sure we passed other creeks along the way, but I don't remember seeing any others on the lower part of the river. The creek is only about 10 foot wide, and there's plenty of vegetation, so it'd be easy to miss, and it is not marked. I know somebody said there was a red flag down there on some of these websites. It is not there. It is not marked. If you miss it, you're going to be hosed. The next thing is that the takeout spot might work if the water is about 2 foot higher, okay? But at the height we were at, the water level, it was a real pain. So there's some railroad tie type steps going down the bank, but ultimately you had to try to get a few feet higher to reach it. And there was nothing but a steep mud bank on either side of that and below it. And so at one point I ended up just sliding in the mud, and I ended up sliding all the way down the mud. I couldn't grip anything and went right into the river. So just keep that in mind. And because of the height, you got to lift these kayaks up to even be able to start to get them out. You're going to need somebody strong with you on your trip in order to get these kayaks lifted out of this takeout spot. So just keep that in mind. So overall, it was a good river run. It was really cool seeing those eagles. That's something I don't get to see every day, and we saw plenty of them along the trip. That was really neat to see. They're just a majestic bird that you don't get to see very often. So that was really cool. It was very scenic, but it is a long trip. At almost 17 miles, it's a long trip. And I've decided for a fishing trip, I feel like somewhere in that 8 to 12 mile mark is the ideal run for a whole day trip, where you get in early in the morning, you have time to fish it, you can get to your takeout before it gets dark. You don't feel that rushed sensation. Like we felt pretty rushed because we were concerned, are we going to make it in time before dark? And we still had to swap vehicles, and it's about a 30-minute run, vehicles, to put in takeout spots. So it takes a while there. So that's just something I decided. But other than that, if you wanted to, spend a whole day doing a long paddle trip in a remote wilderness area, see some wildlife, it's a great trip for that. There you have it. There's the ins and outs, the put in takeout spots, and some things you got to look out for. If you decide to run this section of the trip, just hope you have fun and stay safe out there. And as always, hit that like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.